Okay, well, we were 14 last week. Can anybody remember what we were talking about?
I don't remember, I admit. Without torture, sorry.
Oh, you weren't here last week, were you?
I think so.
Were you? No. Maybe. Anyway, I thought you were missing.
Yeah, it was the three modes of material nature.
Yeah.
It was actually really good. Actually, there were some things which were which kind of made me understand it a little bit more. I can't 100% remember what it was, but I remember thinking, oh, really? Oh, that's what it was. Do you remember the gates of when all the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge? One is
All
acting
right.
in the goodness. Yeah, that I didn't understand that, but you explained it in a really good way, and it's kind of made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny one, that.
Yeah.
People get bewildered. Okay, so, yeah. So chapter 14 finishes where Krishna says, I'm the source of the impersonal Brahman, right?
Mhm.
Because it's impersonal realization and how we can use the modes, how the modes bind us, how they work, and how we can actually use them to free us by elevating ourselves through the modes to a mode of goodness by knowledge. So this is for the jnanis. And so it finishes by, giving the symptoms of one who's transcended the modes, how he transcends the modes, like that. And it says, next to the end verse in the 14th chapter, Mam chayo abhyabhitrena bhakti yogen sevate sargunam samatichetam brahma bhuyaya kalpate. In other words, if we're fully engaged in devotional service, with body, mind and words, then we transcend the modes. We're no longer following the mind or, the pushings and pullings of the body, because we're following the instructions of Shastra and the Acharyas. And they're giving us knowledge of how to transcend the modes, how to work in transcendental consciousness. So in that way, by following those instructions, we're actually transcendental, even though we're in the material world.
I've got a
Yeah.
question for you, Maharaj.
Okay.
So there's this girl who comes to our meetings, an Indian girl, and she was kind of brought up as like a Shiva worshipper, and obviously there's the Kumbh Mela on now, and and the devotees, they seem to strive for the mode of goodness, but it seems to me that these a lot of kind of the Babas, the Shiva worshippers, they do the opposite. They strive for the mode of ignorance. They do things which is in the mode of ignorance, and try to gain some sort of liberation through doing that. What's that about? I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody worships for some different motive,
Yeah.
subtle, either intellectual, mental, or physical. We're looking for some stimulant, some material stimulant. And it's only when we engage in devotional service that we're free from that, because we're doing things for Krishna. Otherwise, if we don't do things for Krishna, we're doing them for some other cause, which is ultimately, a personal cause. And so then we come under the modes of nature when we do that.
Mm-hmm.
In Bhagavadgita, in the 17th chapter, this question is asked by Arjuna. Because by the time we get to the end of the 16th chapter, we've covered everything. What are the devas, what are the asuras, how by, following Shastra we can actually get free from this material world. But then the 17th chapter, Arjuna asks the question about what about those who worship, very strictly, a particular type of worship, but it's not recommended in the Shastra. Because earlier in the Gita, in the 7th chapter, it says that if you stick to worshiping in a certain way, you'll make progress. But then later on, it says that, unless it's actually, anyway, it's connected with Shastra, you can't make progress, so he's bewildered. And that's what it said in the 16th chapter. If Yashastra Vidimutricha Vartate Kamakarata. If we don't worship according to Shastra, then we don't get perfection, happiness, or the supreme destination. So the bit next to it says, Tasmat Shastra Pramanamte. We should work according to Shastra to make progress. So there's two contradictory things mentioned in the earlier part of the Bhagavadgita and the last chapter, the 16th chapter. So in the 16th chapter, are you following me all right? Okay. So in the 17th chapter, Krishna says that, you know, that if we're not worshipping purely, even if we're in so-called devotional service, then we're going to be actually contaminated by the modes. If we're not following Shastra, we'll be fully contaminated by the modes. So, you know, we have to follow the instructions of Shastra and the spiritual master to raise above the modes. Because, you know, he's asking a question about somebody who falls in between the two things. They're strict about a certain type of worship, but it's not according to Shastra. That's not being covered. So Arjuna asked that question. And Krishna says quite frankly, says, if they do that, they're in the modes. And so, in other words, you know, worshippers of Lord Shiva, they want some material boon. So they'll worship in a certain way. And they'll imitate. They're just imitating. They shouldn't imitate, actually. You see, you know, these, what they call them, Nagababas. I don't really know what they're doing, but they're not, you know, they're austere, but they're not like pure, they're not devotees. So you see them dressed like Lord Shiva, they actually go naked, put ash all over their body. You know, in the middle of the winter, they're completely naked and they live like that. So they've got some power, but it's completely useless. They're actually you know, in one respect, they're performing austerities, but it's tamasic. It's in the mode of ignorance just to get some material benediction. So this is explained in the 14th chapter, worshipping the modes, or one of the chapters anyway. Worship for some ulterior motive, like that, mode of passion, ignorance, or goodness. So you've got all these permutations and modes as long as you're not worshipping purely in Krishna consciousness. That's the point. And you know, on top of that, some people are just imitating, like the Nagababas. So you know, Lord Shiva's not really satisfied with that, but he takes their worship to try and help them to get to the next stage. Because the Bhagavad Gita says, when we get something from our austerities and penances, we feel satisfied, and it gives us faith in the process. So, you know, Lord Krishna does that through these different representatives, that they get some benefit from what they're doing because they're controlling the senses to some degree, even though it's for the wrong reason, but they go in the right way, they're controlling the senses like that. So it's like an incentive to go to the next stage and understand what's higher than that. And so they'll gradually come to the point. Well, theoretically, if they can come to the point of pure devotional service, if they meet a devotee and they start following his instructions to rise above the modes completely. Mamchayo Vivitrain, I want to engage in full devotional service, you know, unaffected, not deviating in any circumstances, then we transcend the modes. So all of the types of worship are in the modes, so we get different colours and different, you know, so many different types of worship, so many different types of dress and like that. All right. Okay. We will be now. So now we've come to the Brahman stage. Somebody who's engaged in full devotional service comes to the spiritual platform, the Brahman platform. So that's a neutral position. You know, in the 18th chapter it says Brahma Bhuta, the Brahma Bhuta platform. Prasanatma becomes very satisfied, joyful. But then that's just freedom from the modes. Next, we have to be engaged in devotional service. Bhakti Mama Bhagyanati Yavanyas Chasmitat Vasaha. So this verse is still talking about Gyan. But in the verses, in the purports, Prabhupada always talks about pure devotional service, just to help us to see it from that point of view. And the verse is not necessarily talking about pure devotional service. Yeah. I've said this many times. And so we're going from the verses, you know, that it talks about a banyan tree. Earlier we talked about a tree on the side of a reservoir of water, you remember? He said, actually, it's in this chapter. When it's actually on the side, on the banks, it's reflected into the water. And it looks like a real tree. You know, if it's completely smooth water, you'll actually be thinking that it looks if it's real. But it's an imitation, that's all. It's just a reflection. So this material world's like that. You know, the reflection's there, and that water is equated to material desire. If there's material desire, then our real nature will be reflected on material desire, which perverts everything. So, but if we get rid of material desire, we get rid of the water, there's no actual tree there. There's just the original spiritual tree. So this verse is talking about how we, you know, we need knowledge to understand what we're after, but we also need detachment. Yeah. There's two things in Bhagavad Gita. That's attachment to Krishna and detachment from matter. So we're talking about Gyan to understand our position and go forward. But this particular verse, or chapter, 15th chapter, it's talking about detachment from this tree of material, of the material world, the banyan tree. I mean, we don't have many banyan trees in England, if any at all. Maybe in the botanical gardens or something like that, you know. But not on like Ilkley Moor or something. You know what I mean? On Ilkley Moor, about that. Yeah, just turn right at the banyan tree, you'll be all right. So, yeah, banyan tree, it's like it grows out of the ground, then it gets roots coming out, and those roots reroot themselves, and another branch, another trunk comes up, and it just goes on and on and on. And you know, it becomes a complete maze. You can't find out which was the original, you know, the original seed which was planted, which gave the original trunk. So it's just talking about, by knowledge, understanding how this tree is constructed, we can actually chop it down. We can chop it down at the root through knowledge. Basically, that's what the chapter's talking about. Okay. Yeah.
He says that knowledge and detachment comes naturally with bhakti anyway, doesn't it? By practicing devotional service, knowledge and detachment develops without any extraneous effort. I've heard
Yeah.
that, if I remember.
Yeah, I mean, if we can fully engage all the time, but I mean, it's not always possible for everybody to do that. So we have to have the intelligence not to do the wrong things. By knowledge, we actually refrain from doing those things, and by chanting, we get the strength to do that. We're not on the platform of just being able to drop everything. We're still attached. And so there has to be some effort from our side to, you know, to follow the regulative principles. But it would be impossible to follow them unless we chanted and became spiritually strong. So sometimes we may be attracted by the material energy. We have to sometimes use our intelligence. You know, we read Bhagavadgita and we see what the real, and that gives us some spiritual strength and information, and we're able to see things for what they are and avoid them. But if we don't do that, our senses will overcome us. So yeah, I mean, if we can fully engage all the time, great. But at some point we're thinking, what am I doing? You know, if we don't understand the process, I could be watching a match. You know. And that happens. People do that. You know, all of a sudden they get bewildered and where they go. Okay. Where is everybody anyway? You know what I mean? It's like there's nobody here this week.
I think Don and Cynthia.
They've gone away, and
Yeah.
Barbara, you know, she's spaced out.
I'm here.
And who else is there? There's,
Barbara is here.
Barbara's here, look.
oh, she's here. She's here.
Yeah.
Sorry, Barbara. That is it.
I'm here.
And then there's what they call the other devotee, Anthony, ain't he?
Anthony,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anthony.
Isn't it there?
I think maybe because I put the reminder on late. I think
Ah.
that was it.
Anyway,
I used to do
don't
the night before.
this is natural. When I started the Bhakti, Bhakti Shastri course, first time I started it, actually second time I started, there were like 36 people. I thought, how am I going to actually deal with 36 people? Then after about a month, there were like, 25. And then after about 3 months, there were about 20, And eventually it boiled down to about 16. So that's what happens every single time,
Yeah.
because it's quite a commitment, every week and doing the homework and that. So, it's the same, Bhagavadgita is a philosophical book. And unless you really want to try and understand it, and, it'll become a daunting challenge.
Mm.
Anyway, let's get started. We haven't really started yet, but anyway, no worry.
It's only a short chapter anyway, isn't it, Maharaj?
What?
It's only a short chapter anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it's only 20 verses.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Krishna said in 1427 that we take shelter of the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, in devotional service, and we transcend the modes. Because he's the source, next verse says, because he's the source of the modes. Brahmano hi pratistaham. And so now we're going to hear about, let's have a look. Yeah, well, I was talking about 1426 in last chapter, talks about devotional service, which is attachment to Krishna. Yeah, devotional service. But we have to see that we have to be chopping the attachments as well. We make a conscious decision to follow the principles and that like that. So that's starting to chop this tree, this banyan tree of material attachment.
Mm.
This banyan tree is called Ashvata Vriksha. Ashvata means banyan tree, and Vriksha means tree. With the axe, what kind of axe is it?
Detachment.
Yeah, it's of detachment. It's actually knowledge as well. When we've got knowledge, we can detach. In the fourth chapter, the end verse, it says, Tasmata Gyan Sambhutam Ritstanam Gyanin Atmanaha Chitvenam Samsayam Yogam Tishto Bharat. It says, therefore one should, defeat this lust. Let me just read it. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your mind or in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed with a weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, or Bharat, stand and fight. So we're repeating what that said. Knowledge, which this section is Gyan, the sword of knowledge. There's also another important verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam 1, 2, 4, 13, I think it is, which says the same thing.
Do you mean
So-
the verse which describes, Maharaj, the verse which describes material world as banyan tree, which you should chop down? That one? Or is
Oh,
it
we're going to
different?
read about that now.
All right. Okay.
It was in the verses that we read now. We've not even started reading yet. Anyway, it's good to have a good background to it instead of just reading through it. And yeah, there's one in the. Let's find that, shall I?
I think it's 4 canto, isn't it? 4 canto, maybe.
But first canto. Let's have a look. Here we are. Yad anudiyasina yukta karma granti nibandanam. So that's a knot, karma granti. Chindanti means cut. Kovidastasya, cut with knowledge, kovida, or intelligence. Kona kurya katartim. With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to this message? Yeah, so knowledge is actually cutting the knot. This is 1 to 15. So now you've got some background knowledge. So we'll go back to Bhagavadgita. Okay, so do you want to read Jai Krishna Prabhu?
Yeah. Okay. Text 1. Hi Bhagavana Vacha Udhava Mulam Adaha Sakam Ashvatam Prarur Avyayam Chandamashi Yasya Varnai Yastam Veda Sa Vedavit. That's the wrong tune, in it?
Let me just find it. Sounds all right.
Oh, I'll go with that one then.
Uram mulam madashakam ashtam prabhu avyayam chandam siyasya pranani yastam veda savedavit.
I'll go with that tune, that what you've just done. Okay, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is said that there are an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas."
Okay.
Number 2. Adahas kadvam prashtas tasya shaka guna pravrida vishaya pravala adhasya mulanyan usantanti kar manubandini manusya loke. The branches of this tree extend downwards and upwards, nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The twigs are the object of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Okay, 3 and 4. Narupam ashyeha taho plabyate nanto na chadir nacha sampratishta ashvatam enam su virudha mulam ashanga shastrena dritena jitva tata padam tat parima gitavyam yasmin gatana nivratanti bhuya tam eva chadyam purusham prapyade yata praviti prastrita purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, no one never returns, and there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Wow.
Well, that's quite a process. You know, Prabhupada gave us a simpler process. Just, you know, devotional service. Okay, so yeah, it tells you in these verses what these different parts of the tree mean, you know, like the like the twigs are the sense objects, or the objects of the senses, the leaves are the, you know, and then you've got the three modes of material nature, which are like the roots which re-root themselves in the ground again from the original tree, like that. So it's not, I always find it difficult to remember all these things, and I try to understand them. You know, I keep reading them and trying to understand how I can simply remember these things, but then I always fail. Because I don't know, it's just the way, I suppose it's the way everybody's mind works, but I find it difficult. I don't know whether anybody else does. But anyway, it's given anyway. Prabhupada wrote it in such a way that we can understand in a direct way that, you know, there's the sense objects, there's the senses, and these are all actually attaching us to this world like a tree. It's just a, you know, I suppose if anybody lives in India, it's an easy way of understanding it. And but a lot of things that they put in Bhagavadgita and different shastras, the concepts are not always easy for me to understand. I don't know about others.
I just could say I kind of understand it practically through my own experience, but the analogy given,
That's it.
yeah, I can't visualize the analogy. I can't put the two together.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Okay, well, we're now 4, 5, aren't we? So maybe Mayapur Chandradaya can read.
I'm sorry, Maharaj, I just lost the track of the verse because I thought that we are chapter 15, but now I could not. Sorry?
15.5.
15.5.
15.5.
Okay, I'm getting there. So, Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosha Adhyatma Nitya Vivrita Kamaha Dvandvair Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Samgyair Gachantya Mudhach Padam Avyayam Tat. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, and who are free from dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom.
Yeah, so in Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto,
yeah,
it mentions that devotional service can be practiced by somebody, as this description says, is not too attached to sense gratification, but is not too detached. In other words, is able to actually understand that there's some attachment there and work with it. This is called, you know, using our particular propensity to serve Krishna. If we're too attached, then the sense gratification just overpowers us. if we do too detached, it's difficult to practice devotional service because you're actually working on the platform of detachment when you should be actually using it in Krishna's service. So it said one who's actually not too attached or too detached is qualified for devotional service. And sometimes in the beginning of devotional service, we tend to try and be a bit too detached, austerity. And that tends to frustrate us. And, at some point we can't maintain it. We've got to act in our natural position and use it in Krishna's service, then we're relatively comfortable. Okay, next one.
Tat bāsayate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yadgatvana nivartante tadama paramam mama. The supreme abode of mind is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world.
So now it's starting to talk about the, we've understood how we're attached. And now it's moving on to another section which talks about what we're trying to obtain. Right? You can't actually perform anything unless you have a goal in mind. Or as Covey used to say, anybody remember Covey? Begin with the end in mind. Always keep focused on what we're trying to achieve. So now we're focusing on what we're trying to achieve. That's supreme abode. No sun, no fire, no electricity. Because they are there, but we don't have to separately endeavor. We don't have to have a sun in the sky. We don't have to have a moon in the sky. We don't have to have a power station. It's all there in the spiritual world automatically. It's coming from the Brahma Jyoti, which is the effulgence of Lord Krishna. You got a question?
Yeah, I just kind of read the verse. I just say when Krishna spoke the Bhagavadgita, there wasn't electricity. But I suppose there was like lightning, and he's just used the word pavakaha, and it's fire or electricity. So I think it's more like on an elemental thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's what we call it. We call it
Yeah.
electricity. We've named it electricity. It was already there before we called it electricity. So
I think
Prabhupada using electricity so we can understand what he's talking about.
I think it probably wasn't harnessed like it is now, though. Like nowadays, it's harnessed to run everything, but it probably wasn't used.
You mean the power lines all over the place?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they could harness it by mantras. They could harness it by mantras, and like the Brahmastra.
That'd be
They
handy
would,
now with the price of
eh?
electricity. That'd be handy now with the price of electricity,
Yeah.
wouldn't
I say we lost the heating in here. They'd be handy.
it?
Yeah. Let's have a look what it says about that. It just explains what each part means. Natad says it is not illuminated by sun, na shashanko, na pavaka by moon, nor pavaka electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Yad gatvana nivartante. And then they reach the supreme abode, tad dharma, supreme paramam mama, my supreme abode. And so we won't be satisfied until we get there. That's the point. Because we're constitutionally, of spiritual energy. And we're artificially trying to enjoy through matter. And that's the cause of our bewilderment. One devotee here is writing to one devotee who comes to the temple, and he's always, he's like really obstinate. He just wants to enjoy matter, and he always gives so many reasons why. But he'll never be satisfied. He thinks that eventually he'll get what he wants in life. But it's just causing him misery now, and when he gets it, it'll cause him misery, if he gets it.
So, ironically, the opposite's true, isn't it? When you give up the desire to get what you want through material energy, you get what you want. The opposite's true, isn't it?
Yeah, because then you're not attached to it.
Yeah.
That's yeah. So detachment brings first it brings relief. Attachment brings pain. In so many ways, we're frightened of losing it or maintaining it. It's such a headache. But once it's gone, then it's a good point. That 7 starts to talk about the living entity. How we're part of that original spiritual nature, but Prakriti Karshati, we're struggling with the material energy. We're originally from Mami Bamso, Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Mana Shastran Indriyani, Prakriti Karshati. Maybe you can read that one. My approach, Andrea.
Yeah, so shall I repeat because you just almost read? Or
Yeah, read the
other-
English.
English, all right. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind.
Yeah, we're fragmental parts of the. That means, you know, it's not like a chunk. We chip off the old block, you know, like that. We're actually the same in quality, and we're the same in quality, but not in quantity. Prabhupada says, Om Purnam Adapurnamidam. So this means that, you know, in this verse it says that Krishna is complete and perfect, and all emanations from him are also complete and perfect. So that's not a material understanding. When you take something from the original perfect thing, it becomes more imperfect. But everything which comes from Krishna remains perfect. So we're actually perfect because we're made for a particular purpose and we're Krishna's energy. But we're just covered. And therefore we're actually thinking we're imperfect. But we're not actually imperfect. We're still perfect, but we're living in a dream, that's all. Hare Krishna. Big dream, isn't it? Okay, so Barbara Mataji, are you there?
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We're on to
15,
8.
yeah, 15:8. The living entity in the material world carries its different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aroma. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. 15:9. The living entity, thus taking another great body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects.
Yeah, so the mind is the mind comes up with some concoction, and then, you know, if we meditate on it, it's like Jayato Vishayan Pumsha. While contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops a desire to enjoy that way. So then, to fulfill that desire, the material energy creates senses. So the mind's a generating force of creating the body. And according to the mind, the senses are generated to enjoy a particular lifestyle. So it's so that's, you know, the root of all spiritual practice is to control the mind. That's why it's considered the friend or the enemy. If we use it properly, it's actually we're using the senses in an appropriate way, and if we don't, then we use them in an inappropriate way and become degraded. Yeah.
I read that's what You know, like all the sitting postures and all that is for, really, just to control the mind. You know, all the yogis, they do kind of these sitting postures and these austerities just to control the kind of mind.
Yeah. That's all. It's to get the hairs in the body working nicely, then the mind becomes peaceful, then we can focus the mind. And then we can first of all, we can withdraw it from material thought and focus it on the goal that we want to achieve. So when we chant the Hare Krishna mantra, we're already at that platform. The mind, the mind's being focused on Krishna through his holy name. So we actually, sidetrack all these preliminaries that traditional yoga asks us to do just by chanting. So if we think we're having a hard time chanting, think about what you'd have to do if there weren't the chanting. You'd have to sit in the middle of the kitchen, put a cushion down, and sit meditating there. And there'd be people knocking on the door, so you won't get any peace. And then, anyway, where are we now? 9, is it? No. Oh, no, we've done 9. Do one more, Mataji.
In time. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. The one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this.
Yeah, so, as devotees, we can actually, I went to, I don't know I forget where I was, but I think I went to where I used to live to visit my parents, and I was out, and in the distance I saw one of my friends, from when I was at school, and I was shocked. You remember the Planet of the Apes? Anybody remember that?
Yes, yes.
You remember? Yeah, he just
Yeah.
looked like an ape. He got sideburns, and it's that time when he had sideburns down here. Really thick side, long hair. Roddy McDowell used to be on one of the monkeys on Planets of the Apes. He just looked like Roddy McDowell. And I could see, due to his lifestyle, he's going to be a monkey in his next life. He's too much attached to sex life, so you get a body to suit. Anyway, so that's what happens is we start to focus on things that are important to us, and we generate that for our future life. But if we can, devote, if I ain't being a devotee, I'd have never thought out about it. I mean, that's just the way it looks, But there's a reason for it. It's the modes of nature. It's the way we think, the way the intelligence is working. Our association is actually, warping the mind, and then the body's following. It's already being prepared for the next body. And, people can't see that. You see some people when you're doing Sankirtan, they're walking down the street with a dog. And you look at the dog and you then look at the person, and actually they look similar. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, owner and the dog.
Yeah. This is developing the same characteristics. So be careful.
Yeah.
No pets.
Don't buy a bulldog.
You've got a bulldog?
No, don't buy one. You might end up looking like it.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Okay, I'll do a bit of reading as well now. Number 11. Yatanto yoginas chainam pasyantatman yavastitam yatanto pyakram kritatmano nainam pasyancha chetasaha. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is happening or what is taking place, though they may try to. So what's that say? So the link to the next one, to 12. So even sense enjoy, yeah, we can't enjoy the senses without Krishna's intervention. You know, so if we can actually understand it, it helps us to, you know, people are subtly doing that, aren't they? They're praying for so many things to God. So they know there's, you know, people who are pious, so they know there's some link there. But it's actually a fact that, you know, we all know that Krishna's in the heart and he's actually fulfilling the desires of all living entities. You know, it's a verse in Bhagavadgita we'll read in the 18th chapter. What's that say? Anybody know it about on the machine of the material energy? Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hrideshi Arjunatisti Brahmayam Sarvabhutanam Yantra Rudrarimaya. So a yantra is a machine. I'll read that, shall I? The translation. Has everybody just had a Sunday dinner? Lots of bleary eyes and yawning. Yeah. 61. Should have abolished, ready, shall I? Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hrideshe Arjuna Tistati Ramayam Sarvabhutanam Yantra Rudradimaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everybody's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated on a machine made of the material energy. So here it says, one can develop Krishna consciousness even while living in this world by appreciating Krishna as the maintainer of material phenomena. Following verses help us to know how things are taking place in this material world and thus be established in knowledge. So we've heard about the Ashvata tree, how it's binding us, our position of the Supreme Lord, and how we're being, by the mind, we're being taken to different situations, developing different bodies, different situations. So, so next, from 12 to 15, we're appreciating more Krishna's particular situation. Is different from what we've already heard about ourselves. So, does Jai Krishna want to read?
Sorry, yeah. So it's 12, chapter 12.
Yeah.
Text 12, sorry. Yad Aditya Gatam Tejo Jagat Bashayate Kilam Yach Chandramasi Yach Kagnau Tat Tejo Vidi Mamakam. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me, and the splendor of the moon and the splendor of the fire are also from me. Gam Avishya Chabutani Dar Ayam Yaham Ojasa Pushnami Kaushad Hi Sarva Somo Bhutva Rasat Makaha. I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon, and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Aham Vaishvanaro.
Actually, that last verse, you know, Prabhupada were on a morning walk, and Vishaka, you know, the president, the manna, she was a photographer with her husband, Yadubal, and she was running in front of Prabhupada, clicking the camera, you know, taking photos. And Prabhupada was talking about this, about the moon, how it, in the purport, it probably talks about how it nourishes the vegetables. When she heard that, you know, she's a philosophical person, she stopped taking photographs. She said, Prabhupada, how does the moon nourish the vegetables? And Prabhupada stopped and looked at her for a while, and he said, why don't you ask him? In other words, you're saying, you know, why do we need to know that? That's a detail. Just accept that, you know, this is what Bhagavadgita says. You know, otherwise it can go never ending into the biological chains that have to work in order that the moon, you know, nourishes the vegetables. But it's actually not really that important, is it? But, you know, when we're entangled in the material world and we've got that sort of mind, you know, if we can't understand that, it's difficult for us to go forward. So, you know, the Shastras go into a lot of detail just to actually help people out of the hole that they're in. You know what I mean? They're so trapped in the way of thinking. And there's one, you know, I think I've said this before, Krishna Dharma, he was the temple president in Manchester when I was there. And his wife was, you know, she's actually an MA in philosophy, or maybe a PhD, I'm not sure. I think it's a master's. And so, you know, she's like very, very philosophical in everything. And the one verse, it says, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastrikai, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhihai. And the translation is, the moment's association with a pure devotee can give one complete perfection. And, you know, moments like lava matter, it's like an 11th of a second. And so she was like thinking, what? 11th of a second? And so she kept asking all the, you know, the big priests who came through, and she couldn't really accept any of the answers. And, you know, she even got me at it. I was thinking, yeah, what about 11th of a second? And then one day I was, you know, I was taking prasadam and I was listening to a tape of Prabhupada, and somebody asked that question. So I was here, you know. And Prabhupada said, it's like this. He says, there's wet grass and dry grass. He said, if you try to set fire to wet grass, you'll be there all day. You'll be very lucky to get set it alight. He said, but if you set fire to dry grass, whoosh, no time at all, you know, the field's burnt to ashes. He said, it's like that. If we're dry, if we're ready for hearing, then we can put it into practice straight away. But if we're not, we have to, you know, it'll take a long time. So we have to be, you know, we have to be purified and eager to hear. You know, the process of devotional service in that respect, it's like drying you out, you know, so that you get a taste for hearing. And that taste for hearing will convince you. So, you know, it's like when we're sick, if you really got a bad digestion, you can hardly digest anything. You just, you know, you take some ghee and it all goes straight through, you know, because it don't digest. But a little bit gets digested, right? A little bit. And then next day you take some more, it goes straight through, and a little bit gets digested, a little bit more, and then gradually a little bit more. And gradually, you know, the appetite or the fire of digestion grows. So this is Krishna consciousness. In the beginning, we may not have much taste, but gradually we just keep doing it, and bit by bit it'll increase. We're talking about digestion there, aren't we? We got a bit off the track.
Shall I carry on?
Yeah.
How,
Just 2 minutes to go, so we'll let this last one, right?
all right. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Prananapana Samayukta Pachamya Yanam Chato Vidham I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuffs.
Yeah. So that's the question that's what she was asking about. Okay, any questions, any comments?
Maybe one question or one comment, if I can. Yeah, it's like you reminded me that I had also questions like that, especially like first year studying the philosophy. I always ask Suhotra Maharaj or someone like that, and he was just completely smashing me that I'm asking about detail. He always challenged the questions which he didn't like, you know. So it's actually helpful to understand the principle and detail. And yeah, so it was a good point, thank you. And
Yeah.
question is not sure how to put it, but we have different natures, different egos, different, someone is choleric, someone is sanguinic, we are born with certain natures. How much can be like eternal identity of the spirit soul reflected in the material world in those natures? Is it completely different, completely detached, or a little bit connected? I
You're
cannot hear
muted, Maharaj.
Yeah. We cannot hear Maharaj.
Yeah, I'm just testing.
Okay, now we hear you. Thank you.
Okay, so it's like the moon's reflected in water. If you get some pots of water and it's night and the moon comes out, you'll see the moon reflects in the water. It's not actually in the water, but it looks like it is. And when, you know, if you keep tapping the pots, the water will start to ripple and the moon will ripple. So if we identify with the moon in the water, we'll actually be affected by that. So we're identifying with the body like that. We're actually transcendental, we're Brahman, we're nothing to do with the body. If we identify with the original moon, we won't ripple, we won't be phased by things which are happening. So if we identify with the original moon, Krishna Chandra, you know, then we will be actually steady with our real nature and our real relationship, understanding that, you know, okay, there's ripples, but they're just affecting the body. So that's how we're connected. So the whole thing is to put the mind on devotional service, and then we're not affected by the body so much. Eventually we can absorb ourselves completely. You know, like somebody who was fell in love or something like that, you know, they're not always, you know, with you, right? You know, they're actually in another world thinking about the sweethearts. So it's like that, you know, when we're in Krishna consciousness.
So theoretically, in one life can be someone tough guy who gets attached to some woman and then becomes very soft woman in next life.
Yeah, why not? That's what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get the reactions for what we've inflicted on others. So we got to be careful. Yeah. Okay. So we'll start next week on 15. And hopefully we'll retrieve some of the lost souls.
I'll put the advert on the day before again next time.
Yeah, okay. All right, everybody. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Santara Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Jai.
Jai.
Or Premanandi.
Hari Bol.
Thank you.
Thank you.